Okay, so now I'm actually going to invite Fatima to turn her camera back on and join us, assuming you're still here, Fatima, to kind of help field some of these questions from the audience. We've got a few coming in here, so I'm going to pose the question. I'll kind of leave it up to you to jump in and answer. So I'm not going to pose it to anyone specifically to start, but the first question is from Eric, and it talks about something that we did not discuss today, which is homeless people. So Eric is asking that, he says here, homeless people, regardless of their backgrounds, are often the subject of hate. How do you suggest this be addressed?
I can start that one if you
Chris.
like. It's a really tough question, so I guess it's not a great place to start in saying it's a tough question, but I'm actually on the board for a shelter in Oshawa, which is a community that has been after the closure of GM and historically, Oshawa has had a lot of homelessness, and it is a difficult issue. And we, as a business, we also struggle with this a little bit because we have people sleeping in our vestibule and kind of around and loitering. So I see it from the business perspective, but I also see it on the board for the shelter. I think it's a really difficult issue, and there is a lot of hate and there is a lot of violence and abuse. And I think empathy goes a long way, and I think support for governments and community organizations that are trying to work with people to get them homed. And as I'm sure we all know, there's often a lot of things that are causing homelessness is not an easy problem to solve. It's often mental health and addictions and trauma and racism and homophobia and a bunch of different things that are happening to people. And so I think housing first is really important, that we all start to support getting people homed first and then giving them access to care. But same thing, I think empathy goes a long way in with that situation.
Sure. But and I would add, we do a lot to support the United Way here in Grey Bruce. United Way is heavily involved with a lot of member organizations as well to help with homelessness. And really, they also get at addressing the causes through addictions or other aspects. We also do a lot of work with Habitat for Humanity. Our employees volunteer a lot for these organizations in terms of outreach. And I think it's through those types of organizations. If your organization doesn't support United Way by chance, I would ask, maybe that's a C-suite thing, is I would ask the CEOs of companies to really look at how they can help United Way to continue to expand their efforts and work through. They are able to do a lot of good with the money that they're provided and really stretch that money to different support organizations that can help get at the causes. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Mike. The second question I'll put out, this is from Prakash. This is, well, something from the news, actually. Should statues of colonial leaders be removed and relocated to museums as a part of Canadian history? At present, many are being vandalized and defaced. So what's your take on this issue?
I'll endeavor to answer that question.
Okay.
What I think, and I think just basically looking at the history of South Africa, talking about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to move ahead, you really do have to understand the past. And it's really not a right or wrong answer. I think what you really have to do is basically look at it through the lens of stakeholders and then make a more informed decision. So I don't think you can turn around and just say, yes, take them down because, or no, don't take them down. I think you really do need to engage stakeholders in the community in weighing in. And there'll be trade-offs that needs to be made, right? And I think when you understand the trade-offs and the decisions, it's a much better answer in the spirit of transparency.
Thanks, Fatima. Great. The next question, this is from Scott. If you're a relatively small company, say 150 employees, with a small HR department and a healthy culture, can you recommend a resource or a starting point to begin?
I guess my inclination is to be a consultant and answer a question with a question. I guess I would say it depends on what's the problem you're trying to solve, or what are you trying to impact. So if the culture is healthy and there isn't much change to be made, or if it's around awareness, or it's around how you work in your community. So I think there's a lot of resources out there, and certainly happy to connect offline. But I think I would spend some time to just think about, yeah, what does success look like, or what type of resource are we looking for, and what are we trying to accomplish?
And, you know, that I would add, you can start small too. You don't have to aim for the stars. It could be that the 150 people choose that they're going to try to build a home with Habitat for Humanity, or do outreach to an organization for mental health counseling, or something along those lines. It doesn't have to solve world hunger, right? Things are done one step at a time usually. And just take that step. Pick something that everybody gets excited about, and pick the one thing and decide to go do it. You know, I'll give you an example. We had a soccer fundraiser. You know, first year was just a handful of teams. The last year we ran it before the pandemic, there were 20 teams that raised $100,000, right? So these things catch on. So just take something that you're passionate about and do it.
Yeah, and chances are, to close the loop, Micah, chances are, you know, you don't, at 150 employees, you also don't have to do it alone. So if there's something you're passionate about, there's probably, you know, we participate in with a number of CEOs in IELO, which is one of it's basically an initiative around one of the poorer neighborhoods outside of the GTA, and how do we impact change in those neighborhoods? How do we hire people in those neighborhoods? And so, you know, that maybe is something as being, you know, depending where you're based, or probably initiatives like that you could be part of as well.
Great, thanks, Nigel. The next question, this is from Bobby. What can CEOs do to ensure middle management carries out their D&I or anti-hate visions? Would you recommend performance evaluations or incentives? What can they do?
Yeah, I can talk about that. I think there's a lot we have to do in that space, just for engagement and involvement in the planning and the preparation, coaching, mentoring. Right. Typically those folks are good people. They want to do what's right, and they want the best candidates, right? So how do you get their eyes open to see the best candidates? And really, when you hire the best candidates, the whole organization prospers. So getting into that process starts with leadership development, and really teaching this process early on in one's career, and then advancing it. And to get through change, clearly, right, we get involved with looking at how things are progressing. Got to be a hands-on approach for that.
Yeah, I will echo that. I think the interesting comment is, and we had this in our environment, where they were saying, do we actually implement metrics and accountability measures? And people were saying, well, it has to be behavior. But I mean, behavior has taken us at Deloitte 175 years, right? And we still didn't see the pendulums move. So it has to be both. It needs to be your behavior as well as some metrics in place, because we all know what gets measured gets actioned. But it can't be only a measurement, because without the behavior, you can have lots of wrong moves being made, and that actually just derails the entire process. So that's just my view.
Right. Thanks, Fatima.
I'd also add that it's really important that you have a vision that's understood by your whole organization. You know, if your scorecard says that you weren't racist that month, you know, it's really about understanding why your organization is doing what it does, and why it's important to your organization as a whole. So then you know that people in their private lives at home, and when they're making decisions, are always thinking of what is the vision, what are the values of the company, and fulfilling those.
Great, thanks, Chris. Next question. This is from Hardeep. How do you overcome overt bias among your managers? In this case, he's saying here that we have a manager who refuses to hire people with accents for customer-facing positions because he complains that nobody can understand them. So how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, again, without knowing much about the specifics, there is the carrot stick approach. So I do think I think I would, you know, echo some of Mike's point around, you know, education and helping to make the person aware. But I also think at some point, you know, you also have to make a call as a business leader if someone, you know, doesn't fit in your, you know, kind of your vision or your culture. And this is a very tough one, right? I mean, I think a lot of organizations, you know, what do you do with a high performing salesperson who's misogynist, right? You know, at some point, do you value the results more than the behavior? Like those are the tough things, right? I certainly know, you know, our stance, but yeah, and in that case, and I think it's, you know, it actually goes, if you continue this particular example through to conclusion, I'd also ask the organization, what do you do if you're running a call center and someone asks the person in your call center about their accent or where they're from or were they born in Canada? You know, how much of that do you tolerate from a customer perspective, right? Because I love Fatima's quote about the diversity of Canada and the trajectory we're on. So, I mean, I think it's an interesting question about the manager, but I think it's a bigger question around, you know, are people with accents welcome in your workplace?
Yeah, I would add, I mean, this is something that comes up all the time. I think it's a question of what lens you're bringing it through. Is it a lens of bias that certain accents are palatable and others aren't? So I think you really do have to think about that. You also have a business to run, so you've got to balance, and there are trade-offs that are being made. So as long as it's not brought through a bias lens, you know, that's the test there. And it's actually not exactly easy. But I would argue that a person with an accent actually speaks another language and probably fluent in that language and actually doing a job in a language that's not his first. So I think you've got to think about that as well, right?
Well, and also just maybe on a lighter note or a funny note, this reminds me of an example that we went through. Everyone has an accent. So we're a global company and we had a call with one of our Canadian employees was on a call with folks from the UK and Australia, and they went out to say, you guys are so lucky, you have amazing accents. Actually, on that call, the Canadian was the only one with an accent. So I do think it's a bit of that awareness, right?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Nigel. All right. We've got time for one more question. So this is from Christina. Do you really believe that we're at a tipping point, or as this story fades away, will organizations return to focusing on the bottom line at the expense of everything else?
I'm sure
I
everyone.
can start with the answer to that. And I just think it depends on your company, right? And your company's culture. I think, you know, you see so many times companies will put their name to something, but there's very little follow through internally. It's more advertising, anything else. We often call it greenwashing when it's environmental issues, right? Where a company will buy a wind farm and say, well, we're green, we own this wind farm. Meanwhile, they're taking power off a grid somewhere that's mostly predominantly burning coal. Like, so, you know, they do it to feel good, but really actions need to follow the words. And you literally need to look at the company's values and culture as you go forward. And I think those companies that are on a journey, you know, I think things happen over time. They don't happen instantly. And things that are sustainable or built in and learned by the people. And you can go with companies that have long track records and see they pretty much live by their values year in and year out. That's how they got to be hundreds of years old. So I have hope, right? I have hope for progress.
Yeah, I would just add maybe 2 quick points. On the one, I think this is a journey to drive sustainable change, and it's hard to, you know, and certainly as a leader, I think we have, you know, there's good days and bad days. So there are days where I look back and go, hey, it's been a year since the murder of George Floyd. Has anything really changed for our Black employees on their day-to-day lives? And then I have to sort of say, but it's only been a year, right? So we do have to keep that in mind. I think that the question also talked about, like, is it a tipping point or will we just get back to business results? And I guess I would put a different spin on it and say, I actually think, I guess it depends on your industry, but I don't see them as being mutually exclusive, right? I do think we're entering a war for talent. I think if you're in the tech industry, losing talent to the US, you know, you probably do need to recruit immigrants. I think if you're in a space that is largely dependent on women, you know, you'll have to sooner or later evolve your practices to be more friendly and have more gender diversity. So I think the best organizations will be the ones that are early adopters around doing the right things, but I think the laggards will still be forced to have to tackle some of these to compete, depending on the role talent plays in your business results.
I've seen a recent stat that is, I think 30% of Canadians now are investing with ESG companies that are invested in ESG. So I think that there is a tipping point, and I think that companies will begin to lose access to capital if they're not thinking about environment and sustainability governance issues. So I'm very optimistic about that. And I think it's not going to be companies doing the right things because they have good hearts. I think it's going to be consumers and investors that are doing the right things because they believe in the communities, and companies will have to follow suit or perish, which I think is a good positive outlook.
Great, thanks, Chris. Okay, so we are out of time now. So appreciate everyone's time and contributing to this discussion. If we can go to the next slide, just a couple of quick closing remarks. On behalf of Talent Canada and Annex Business Media, I want to thank you for volunteering your time and your insights. You all provided us with very valuable information on what we can do as leaders, as organizations, and as citizens to make real change. So as I said before, this is just the start of our conversation. You will see full coverage in the pages of Talent Canada in the coming weeks. Our very talented editor, Marcel Vanderweer, was on the line today. He was the one feeding me questions. He's working hard on a story based on this conversation. So we will continue to provide our readers with more information to help them to make a difference here. So we appreciate you joining us today. And once again, if you are able to donate, that is the link there. If you're not able to jot it down quickly enough, the link is live on the event webpage on talentcanada.ca. So once again, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.